Looking live here at the state capitol, an impressive building. As we come back here on Special Report, President Obama will leave his vacation spot in Hawaii and fly back home to Washington later this evening. Some of the president's staunchest supporters are some of his harshest critics tonight. They're upset that the president has signed a defense authorization bill expanding executive powers concerning the detention, interrogation, and prosecution of suspected terrorists. The president also issued a signing statement expressing serious reservations about those elements. During his campaign 4 years ago, then Senator Obama was critical of his predecessor for issuing such statements.
I taught the Constitution for 10 years. I believe in the Constitution, and I will obey the Constitution of the United States. We're not going to use signing statements as a way of doing an end run around Congress.
The White House declined to give us a comment today. Now more on the reaction to the president's decision from Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
In a scathing statement, the head of the ACLU said that Mr. Obama's decision to sign the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, including the controversial detainee provisions, would tarnish his presidency. Quote, President Obama's action is a blight on his legacy because he will forever be known as the president who signed indefinite detention without charge or trial into law. The national Muslim rights group, CARE, slammed the legislation, quote, as a stain on our nation's history, one that will ultimately be viewed with embarrassment and shame. Human Rights Watch chastised the president even before the act was signed.
Codifying indefinite detention inside the U.S., mandating military detention for all terrorism suspects found inside the U.S. would really set the U.S. back, decades in terms of how we approach terrorism.
The Center for Constitutional Rights said the act kills any prospect of relocating detainees and shuttering the Guantanamo camps because the NDAA requires the defense secretary to certify that the transferred men will not commit hostile acts in the future. Quote, the same presidential signature that ordered the closing of Guantanamo almost 3 years ago has now ensured their release or transfer is practically impossible. On the detention of American citizens, critics say Section 1021 is overly broad because it does not rule out indefinite detention and, quote, includes the authority for the armed forces of the United States to detain covered persons. Section 1022, which makes military custody mandatory for a subset of detainees, does make an exception for U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents. On New Year's Eve, in this 1,800-word signing statement, the president seemed to emphasize the point, quote, my administration will not authorize the indefinite military detention without trial of American citizens. While voicing reservations, Mr. Obama signed the act because it guarantees continued military funding, and he promised the provisions would comply, quote, with the Constitution, the laws of war, and other applicable law.
Human rights groups among the president's core supporters on the left say future presidents may apply the law differently, adding the act is a sweeping expansion of executive power beyond what was seen under the Bush administration. Brett.
Catherine, thank you. Still ahead.